I can recall in my studies of world religion that, practices, faiths, belief systems like Vodun and Santeria and the Orishas, for example, when the Catholic priests, missionaries went to some of these West African and South American nations, they attached patron saints, Saint Martin, for example, to an Orisha. And that's how they were able to transition the belief system in, more animism belief systems into Catholicism. That's how they were able to integrate it, because they
synchronized it. They synchronized it, and it also keeps the slaves safe at the same token while doing this, because if they prayed to Santa Barbara and it looked like it's Santa Barbara and they're actually praying to Shango, the slave master wouldn't know that they're actually worshiping Shango or worshiping Oligwa or worshiping Ogun and all this by basically hiding them in the saints or synchronizing them with the saints at the same time. So they were free to worship in that way, shape, or form. If you look at the picture called the 7 African Powers, which is one of the first things I looked up when the internet first came out, I was wondering, okay, well, what do African gods look like? And the 7 African Powers came up, and it was basically these 7 saints, white saints, European saints around Christ or whatever, as the 7 African Powers. But they're actually the Orishas, Ogun, Oligwa, Shango, and that's actually represented except by those particular European saints, which it was safe at the time to worship safely at that time.
The Obeah Woman by Anastasia the Phoenix Armourer. Chapter 14. Dinner was over and the dishes were done. It was now the end of the day. Dora said good night to Angela, and she went to her study to catch up on some reading. She settled into her favorite chair, and opened the book she had chosen. Thoughts of Leo entered her mind. She missed her husband and wondered what he was doing. Suddenly, she could see a car driving slowly down her dirt road. Dora arose, as the car came closer to her house. Her heart was pounding as she slowly closed the book and set it down on the table. The car stopped in front of the house and just stood there. After 2 minutes, which seemed like an eternity, Dora stood to her feet, but she could not move. The door of the car opened, and a man stepped out. He walked towards the gate. Dora still could not move. Her hands and feet were cold, and her heart was pounding in her chest. The man stood in front of the gate, and it opened before him. He walked slowly up the path to the house, and came to the front door. He did not knock on the door. The door just opened and he walked in. He walked through the living room. Dora held her breath as he moved closer and closer to the study. Dora closed her eyes, as the tears ran down her face. She could feel his vibration as he stepped into the room. She just could not move. He walked across the room and stood in front of her. They stood there together in silence, as Dora held her breath. "Hello, my angel," he said softly. Dora exhaled and gasped for air, as she slowly opened her eyes. She could not stop crying, as she gazed into his beautiful hazel eyes. Leo held her face ever so gently in his hands. He kissed her forehead, and then kissed her eyes. Dora held tightly to her husband as he kissed her lips passionately. The room was spinning around her, as she felt the warmth of his body. Suddenly, nothing else mattered. Not Rhonda, not Red Claw, only this moment, only the here and now. Dora did not want this moment to end, as they stood there locked in each other's arms. His kiss was strong and sweet, and for a moment, time stopped and the world disappeared. Leo was high, and his heart was full of love for his wife. It seemed he could not get enough of her. Her lips, her arms, her body. He could hold her forever. "Welcome home, sweet daddy," she whispered as she touched his face, and kissed him over and over again. Dora and Leo walked into the living room. They sat together on the sofa, holding each other. Then they began to talk to each other. There was so much to talk about, it's as though they wanted to remove all the junk that had piled up in their lives for the past 3 years. They talked about Rhonda and her spell. They talked about Red Claw and how he comforted Dora in her time of despair. They talked about many things, and after 2 hours, they had cleared the air between them. They then disappeared into the bedroom to a night filled with love. The morning came too soon, and Dora awoke in her husband's arms. How many times she had dreamed about this day. A dream, was this a dream? Or was he really here? The sunlight streamed in through the window, and Dora laid there looking at Leo's handsome face, as he laid there sleeping. Then she realized it was not a dream. He was really here. The morning flew by, and Leo left after breakfast. Dora prepared for a long drive. She was heading south to see her Uncle Malingo. Dora drove her truck up to the small house that is the home of Clara and Herbert. Before she could knock, Clara opened the door and with a smiling face and open arms greeted and embraced her. "How are you, my sister? My God, you're beaming, positively glowing. What has happened?" Dora took Clara by the hand and sat her down on the couch. For a few moments Dora just smiled at her as though she was about to burst with happiness. "Well, what is it? Don't just smile at me, tell me." "My husband came home last night," Dora said slowly while holding Clara's hand tightly. "What?" Clara screamed as she threw her arms around Dora and rocked her from side to side. Then she put her hands to her open mouth and stared at Dora in disbelief. My God! My God! Did he really?" she whispered as though she had lost her voice. "My God, tell me everything from beginning to end, and don't leave out anything." Dora happily told Clara about how Shango had blessed her by breaking Rhonda's spell and everything that had happened. "I am so happy for you, sister, so happy." Clara embraced Dora again and both women laughed with joy. "It is so good to see you laughing, and I know that he will never leave you again." "I know he won't, Clara, and that is what makes it so damned good." Dora's eyes sparkled as she spoke. "Now, I am going to see Uncle." Dora and Clara walked out to the backyard. Herbert was working on an old car. He is a whiz with all types of machinery. "Hi, Herb." Dora greeted him as she walked over to where he was working. "Hi, Dora. Uncle said you would be coming today. He cleaned up his shack just for you. You know how much he looks forward to your visits." Herbert was wiping the grease from his hands as he spoke. Then they embraced each other. Suddenly a tall man with white hair appeared at the door of the shack. If Frederick Douglass had a twin, then this was it. "Come here, my angel." He smiled and opened his arms. Dora hurried over to him and embraced him. "Hello, Uncle Malingo, how are you? I missed you the last time I was here." Dora kissed the old man on both his cheeks as he guided her into the shack and shut the door. "Oh, Uncle. I know. Shango broke the spell." He smiled at her. "Yes, and he is home." "I know. And it is so good to see you happy again. 3 years is a long time to wait for the one you love." "Yes. Yes, it is." Dora turned from the old man and walked into the large room shack. It had a small kitchen on one end, and the bathroom on the other end. The shack was filled with the most wonderful magical and mystical things, from its wooden floor up to its tin roof. In the middle of the room was a large table which was now covered with large sheets of papers. "What is all this, Uncle?" she asked, walking over to the table. "Oh, just some old building plans I'm studying." He began to roll up the plans and move them off the table. "I have made you some sorrel." "Oh yes. said Dora with delight. "I love your sorrel." She sat at the table while her uncle went into the kitchen and poured her a glass of the delicious red drink. "You came here because of Kokaka, yes?" "Yes. She told me some things that blew me away." Malingo placed the glass of sorrel juice in front of Dora, and then he joined her at the table. "I will tell you a story. This is a story that I've been wanting to tell you for some time, but the timing was never right until now. Many ages ago, when the Dreamweavers and the Secret Ones foresaw what the white tribes would do to the other tribes of Africa, they formulated a plan to keep the white tribes in check. They knew that most of the African tribes by themselves were too weak to fight off the white tribes. So they decided to choose one tribe and build it up to where it would be strong enough to do the job. And to lead this tribe, they fashioned a great soul. This man would be given great wisdom and all the skills he would need to rule over the tribes and protect the land and its resources. This prophecy was given to the witch doctors that had in their possession a great treasure. It is a crystal with enormous power called the Key of Time. This key slows down the aging process and then brings it to a grinding stop, creating immortals. The witch doctors planned to give this key to the great soul after they were sure that he would do what he was supposed to do. When the time was right, this great soul was birthed into the world. In Africa, in the month of Untulakizi, July 1787, his name was Shaka. He was all they had hoped for in the beginning. He built up the Zulu tribe and taught them how to fight, and they became a terrible force in Africa. Then the white tribe came and they brought with them their religion and their tricks. They found that King Shaka was a vain man who wanted to live forever, so they used that and the Bible against him. Shaka didn't know that the very thing he desired most, which was the ability to live forever, was waiting for him in the hut of the witch doctor. He didn't heed their counsel, and gave away the land and its resources. So the witch doctors kept the Key of Time away from Shaka and in the end destroyed him. They were so angry with the white tribe that they formulated a new plan. They saw that the white tribe was greedy. That no matter how much they were given, they wanted more. They knew that they would never learn to live in harmony with the earth and in the end would destroy it and all living on it. So they would use the white tribe's own religion to destroy him, just as he used it to destroy Shaka. The destruction of the white colonizers is foretold in their Bible, and the witch doctors are determined to bring about the fulfillment of that prophecy. Dora stood to her feet and walked around the shack. "And the first phase of this plan is to give birth to the great beast," she said, turning to look at Malingo. "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the names of blasphemy." Dora repeated the scripture that Iguala had shown her. "Yes, that is it. The 7 heads are 7 great nations coming together as one. The 10 horns are 10 rulers that stand together within that great nation. The 10 crowns is a system of power brought about by these 10 great men and women. The name of blasphemy shows that the great nation will reject the laws and statutes of the true God and will bring out its own laws and statutes that will accommodate its lusts, greed, and wickedness. So the witch doctors chose one form among them and gave him the Key of Time. He then allowed himself to be captured, and he was brought here to this island. His name is Kahega. When he came here as a slave, he worked in the sugar cane fields, and as he worked, he began to talk to the people about freedom and the destruction of the white colonizers. The slaves would meet secretly and listen to him speak. It was in one of those meetings that my sister and I met him. We were amazed at his wisdom. He knew all the languages of the different tribes on the plantation, and he spoke to us in our native tongue. We all loved him, especially my sister Iva. She was a Yoruba priestess of the royal house of Oshun. When Kahega realized what great wisdom Iva had, he became very interested in her and the two of them began to see each other. Iva was very beautiful and very strong. She was a daughter of Oshun, the beautiful black goddess of the river. All the men of the plantation wanted her, but she had eyes only for Kahega. They fell in love and were married. He then shared with her his mission and the secret of the key of time. He picked out the strongest men on the plantation and he used the key on them to make them immortals. I was one of them, and so is Aquila. He taught us English and he also taught us how to read and write in English. Things went well on the plantation for 5 years. The work was hard, but we had Kahega giving us hope. But then the old man John Clark, the plantation owner, died, and his son James Clark took over the running of the plantation. In his eyes, we were lazy good-for-nothing niggers and he was going to whip us into shape. To do this he brought in a big black dragonard who he called the Black Slasher. The Slasher was hard and mean. He took pleasure in using his whip and he used it every day. Then one day, his eyes fell on Iva in the big house, and he just had to have her. He did not care that she belonged to Kahega. So one day, he took her in the back room of the house and raped her. When Kahega heard about it he went mad. He got the men together and they burned down the plantation, and Kahega beat the Black Slasher to death with his own whip. Then we ran away into the hillside. We found a system of caves and we started to develop them. We had everything we needed. A river provided us with water and the forest provided us with food. Iva was pregnant and Kahega grew cold toward her. He wanted her to destroy the Black Slasher's child, but she would not. As a priestess, Iva respected all life. When the child was born, Iva called her name Dora. He hated the child and in his heart he planned to sacrifice the child to the gods of darkness. But Oshun, the river goddess, told Iva about Kahega's plan and instructed her to run away with the child. Iva came to me and told me what the goddess had said to her, and we made plans to leave. Kahega's hatred became inflamed, and he told Iva to get out and that he no longer wanted her, and to take the child she so loved and go away. So Iva packed her little bundle and prepared to leave, but before she left, she wanted to make her baby an immortal. She knew where Kahega hid the key, so she took it out of its hiding place. She had seen him use the key before and thought she could do the same on her baby. The key was made up of 2 small crystals. They were stuck together in the form of a cross and they shone with a beautiful blue light. Kahega would place the crystal on the top of a person's head and stand back from them after a minute or so. The blue light would fill the entire body, then he would remove the crystal after the light faded. But the baby was too small to do this, so Iva put the crystal on the baby's stomach. Soon the baby was glowing with the blue light. After a few minutes, the light began to fade, but then the bottom half of the crystal disappeared. Iva could not believe her eyes. She removed the remaining piece and she could see the light from the other piece still glowing in the child's abdomen. She was horrified. She didn't know what to do. After a few minutes, the light on the baby's stomach faded. The child seemed fine, so she took the remaining piece, put it back in its hiding place and got out of there fast. She and I got as far away from there as we could. We spent our time looking over our shoulders because we knew that Kahega would come after us when he realized a piece of the key was gone. It took him 5 years to catch up to us. Iva gave me the child and I took you one way and your mother went another to lead them away from you. I had no idea that he would torture and beat her. He took her back to the caves and tried to make her tell him what had happened to the crystal, but she wouldn't tell him anything. He then took a cutlass and cut off her head. "Stop. Please stop," Dora pleaded. She then put her head down on her hands on the table and wept for her mother. Malingo tried to comfort her, but he knew she had to go through this process. After minutes, Dora was able to pull herself together. Malingo gave her some more juice and she sat again at the table wanting to hear more. So Malingo continued his story. Losing half the key didn't deter Kahega from his mission. He became more and more evil as he plunged himself deeper and deeper into the world of the black arts. As the years passed, he became so evil that many of the men who were with him ran away and hid themselves from him. Half of the key still worked, and soon there were more people flocking to him for the gift of a prolonged life. Before long he had a well-constructed home with an enclosed temple hidden deep within the great mountain. He developed the shadow creepers, half-human and half-demon creature that are so feared that anyone coming in contact with one of them is doomed. They are completely devoted to him. He is their god and they do his bidding without question. Now the time has come for him to put his plan into play. He has kidnapped the children he would use to become the 10 horns of the new kingdom. They will be possessed by 10 dark overlords who will work together to form the great beast. And there is one special child who was chosen from the tribes of the Jews. He will be indwelt by one of the most evil of spirits to fulfill the prophecy of the one the Christians called the Antichrist. Tehega has become the king of the Bakwas. His people are everywhere in key positions in the government, not just here, but in many parts of the world. They are determined to fulfill all the terrible prophecies of the White Tribe's Bible. Can we stop him? Dora asked, her mind reeling from Malingo's story. The only way to stop him is to cut off his head, and that is almost impossible. He is so powerful that no one can even find his home. Very few of us remember where it is, and the moment you set foot onto the ground of the forest around the mountain, he could feel your vibration through the earth and he would know you are there. The shadow creepers would be on you in seconds. I have to save those children, uncle, and you must help me. I will do all I can, Malingo assured her. Dora embraced and kissed him as she said goodbye.